Hello chess lovers, welcome to the new video. What a game I have to show you. That's something really special. So today in Norway there was a game between Sergey Karjakin and Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. As some of you probably know, they had played a world championship match maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it was even in the classical 12 games. 6-6 was the score, and then in rapid, Carlsen was much better. He's very fast, and he had the advantage there, and he really outplayed Karyakin in fast time control. But today, Karyakin had a chance to give to get some sort of revenge if he manages to win. So let's see what happened in the game. So the game opened with e4. Karyakin usually opens with e4. I think that's his main move, or maybe exclusively he plays e4. I'm not sure, but most of the games I've seen from him started with e4. Carlsen started with responded, with Sicilian, knight f3, knight c6, open Sicilian, d4, cd, knight d4, and now we have knight f6, knight c3, e5, the so-called Sveshnikov variation. So in his world championship match against Caruana, Carlsen successfully used this defense. He introduced some new ideas, and he successfully used this weapon. But against Karyakin, if my memory serves me well, he didn't use this weapon, and maybe it was for the better. Let's see. So we have knight b5 and then d6. These are all mainline moves, so not much there to discuss. And now knight d5. So this move was popularized in that match. Of course, the move is older, but as far as I know, it was not played so much. But after that match, this became the rage. This became the main stuff. And then we have knight takes, e takes, and here Carlsen went to e7. You can also go to b8, but it leads to different kind of position. So after knight e7, we had c4, knight goes to g6 because this bishop needs to get developed, so knight was blocking it there. And we have queen a4, threatening some really nasty business, a discovery. Of course, Magnus can defend against that. Bishop d7, queen b4, and here black has a choice. If he wants, he can almost force white to repeat. After bishop c8, defending the pawn, the queen can go back, and we go back with the bishop, and if black wants, he can have a draw. Yeah, so this would be a threefold repetition. But with his next move, Carlsen rejected this opportunity, so he went queen b8, and this showed that he is ready to play for a win. Yeah, if he was happy with the draw, he would have repeated there, but he wanted to outplay Karyakin, or at least to play a game. Carlsen always fights. He never backs up. But let's see what happened. So we have h4. This is a typical trust. When there is a knight on g6, you want to harass it. Black doesn't want to allow that, so he played h5, blocking. And now what will happen is rook is defending this h5 pawn. But in the future, you might envision this king castling and then the rook going to f8. Then no one will defend the h5 pawn, so black is ready, or he has to be ready to sacrifice it. So we had bishop e3, a6, kicking the knight, a knight went back, bishop e7, and now there is a double attack on h4, so can't really let that happen. So g3, and this is what I was talking about before, castles kingside. So now this pawn lacks protection. Yes, at the moment no one is attacking it, but with his next move, Karyakin attacks this pawn. So black cannot really defend it successfully. He can with this bishop, but then that's not really advised to do, because if white just exchanges, this h pawn can continue and open up black's king. So we had b5, c takes, a takes, and I think Carlsen had this position at least 5 times, maybe even more, because he had it, not exactly this one, but with this pawn hanging, something similar, or maybe exactly this one, I'm not sure. But he had this position, or a very similar one, against Caruana several times. And then, after the World Championship match, he used his preparation. He played Sveshnikov, and many grandmasters played this line against him. And he had this so many times, this structure. And I always wondered, what happens if white takes this pawn? But almost no one takes this pawn, because if you turn on the computer, it will tell you it's not really the best idea to take the pawn. Yeah, I mean, you can do it, but black has compensation. But Karyakin, he took it. So he took it, and now I was really excited because I wanted to see how will Carlsen play without this pawn. Because some other guys like Caruana and some other grandmasters that he played, they just didn't bother taking it. They believed him. Maybe they also, for sure, they studied. They knew that it's not the best idea. But Karyakin, he didn't care. He took it. I just want to mention, when we talk about pawn grabbing, taking this pawn is not so smart, because this pawn is in front, something that covers the king, and this pawn actually um, is in a way of black's pieces. Look, here the pawn is blocking the b file, it's blocking the bishop. But once you take it, first of all, you self-pin, so you're pinned. You're not going anywhere anytime soon. Black would have Benko style open A and B files, and C file as well, if the opportunity arises for using it. And also he can just play F5, F4 is coming. He plays on the king side, and white cannot really respond properly because his pieces are entangled. This knight needs to defend the bishop, then there is a pin, and the queen also cannot really go far because the bishop is hanging. So that would be a bad idea, taking that pawn. But taking this pawn, even though it's not perfect, it's not so bad, as we will see. And now Carlsen realizes that this bishop is not doing much, so he wants to transfer it to an active position. So he goes bishop d8 with these ideas. Yeah, white castled. Can't play with the king in the center, at least not here. And we had also, when the bishop moved, it released the e7 square, which is important because the knight has very good prospects here. It can go to d4, supported with this bishop. It can be a nice piece. So bishop g5, pinning the knight, but not really actually pinning the bishop, because if the bishop moves, the knight is hanging, but not really, because the bishop can move with the tempo, attacking the queen, so white doesn't have time to take. So queen had to retreat, and now knight gets time to escape the attack. So here, knight wants to go to d4. That would be a beautiful knight. So that's why the next move is knight e2. So Karyakin is not going to let Carlsen come here and be unattended. So he preempts that. So if now knight comes there, white will just snap it. So we have first bishop b6 supporting the d4 square so that he doesn't have to take with the pawn once the exchange happens. Rook a c1, and now rook a4, activating along the fourth rank. There are some games, even by Carlsen, where he sacrifices a piece on g3 or h4 and then gives some kind of perpetual check, or even has the attack. But here, that's not so easy to do, because we have a bishop defending and another, and a knight and a queen. So probably not going to happen. But still, rook a4, an active move. And now comes Karyakin's creativity. unless this was home prep, but I don't believe he prepared this far. So rook c6, sacrificing the exchange, taking the position to some crazy, um, to some crazy type of position where, yes, you still need logic, you still need just knowledge, but it's mainly about intuition and calculating crazy stuff. Of course, black should take this because this rook now cuts the connection between uh, this bishop and this pawn, so later that pawn might hang. Also, there is pressure everywhere, so black took it. Now white gets a passed pawn for the exchange, and also there is no light square bishop. That's important because then this bishop can dominate the board on the light squares, as might happen. Let's see. Rook c4. That looks like a logical move, attacking the bad guy. Yeah, as Nimzowitsch said, passed pawn is a criminal. It should be kept under lock and key, or even executed. And here, this pawn can never be taken, especially now. If you do that, oops, bishop f2, discovered attack and check. So that would be the end of the game. So Karjakin, of course, didn't do that, but he played a very good move, a4. So you can take with the pawn, because if you do that, your rook is hanging. If you take with your rook, then you abandon your idea of taking here. And probably there is something else which I don't really see, but it's a little bit above my level. But at least one thing is for sure, black would have to spend some time there and not be able to capture. So what happened? But maybe it was a good move. Yeah, you just waste some time, but you get one pawn back. Okay, so Carlsen decided to jump in. He decided to jump in with his knight, and of course, this is a monster, so it has to be executed. Knight took, bishop took. And here, finally, Karjakin takes on b5. So, yeah, so now I remember and I see it. Sorry, I apologize. So Carlsen had to take this pawn. He had to take it with his rook because that would not let white to get two connected pass pawns. In the game, after knight d4, exchange, take on b5. Now white has two connected passed pawns, which are not going anywhere for now, but they are an asset for the future. They are like an investment, you know. So now you can't really do much with it. There is no any profit or whatever if you look at it in, let's say, financial comparison or something like that. But in the future, they might bring some dividends. So here there was a good. So now rook is hanging. So a logical move would be rook c5 to make this rook do a blockading job. So he's blockading the pawns, but from the other side. Instead of being here or here, he's controlling them from back, because this one cannot go, and if this one goes, then the other one becomes tender. So that would be a good idea. But Carlsen, for some reason, played d5. So he defended the rook, and he made a nice pawn duel. But this is actually a concession, as you will see. First, rook c1, an interesting move. Why is it interesting? Because usually when you are an exchange down, you sacrifice it, or as often is the case, you lose it. Let's say you lost an exchange or you sacrificed. Usually you want to avoid exchanging a pair of rooks, because your rook combined with your minor pieces can give you more options. While your opponent has two rooks and they kind of, how to say, they do the same job, you know, but with the rook and minors, you get some variety, so you can create more threats and your defense is easier. But in this position, because of these passed pawns, it makes sense to exchange one pair of rooks. And also, this rook is, I don't know, it's very good. It's stopping the pawns, and it also defends this guy, right? So the pawn defends the rook, but the rook defends the pawn. But look, Now, after this exchange happened, now this is a tender spot. So in the future, it might be a problem. And whenever black pushes, then the queen opens up. So it makes a lot of sense to exchange here. Unusual solution, but the correct one. Queen b6 was played, making a battery, threatening on f2, but of course Karjakin defends with his bishop. And after this exchange, now he takes with the pawn so that he can oppose these two guys with his pawn on e3. Of course, one of them will become a passed pawn. That's a guarantee. But as I said, the diagonal will open up and that d pawn can be blocked, as we will see. Rook d8, supporting king g2, escaping this pin, and then any ideas along the diagonal, but now black is not ready yet to push. If he pushes, the diagonal opens and the end is near. After this, a simple transfer of this light square bishop to one of these squares, and then in conjunction with queen coming here or here, this would be a quick end. So first g6. So first we kick the bishop, and now we are ready to push. But Carlsen first improved his king. Okay, not bad. Queen c3, attacking here, and we have d4. So I mentioned earlier, there will be a passed pawn, but lines will open up for this bishop and for this queen. And also, what is the most important part, the d4 pawn will be blocked. e4, e4, queen d3, blocking the pawn, keeping this secure, and getting ready for the next stage. Let's see what is the next stage. So after queen a5, Karjakin's idea was to put this bishop. That's also what I would do, but actually it was not the best idea, but in general it is, but because of the concrete reasons it was not. So he wants bishop here, he wants this pawn here, and then he will have three pawns and a bishop defending each other, and the queen blocking the pawn. So there will be no way for black to capture any of his pawns or pieces, and then slowly he would improve this position and convert it. But the best way to go here was actually to open up black's king. This is suggested by computer, because if takes, then bishop takes, and black doesn't have time to activate because the pawn is hanging. So rook e8, queen d4 check, game over. Why queen c2 played in the game was not the best? Because, yes, it's a good plan to put the bishop here to protect it, but right here, Carlsen had a chance. He had a chance to activate the rook, and then these squares are tender, queen can come in, and this guy is weak, so, and basically it's about the king, yeah? So this would give a chance to black to activate his rook and queen, while these pawns are not threatening to do anything yet. And Carlsen missed his chance. He didn't appreciate this opportunity. He went in with his queen. So first he wanted to defend the pawn and then to go with his rook. But that's the wrong order, because now white has just enough time. b3, the mentioned plan, rook e8, and bishop c4. Once you achieve this with white, you can never lose. I mean, you can lose if you let this queen come here and rook come there, but that takes few moves. And whenever black moves, it's again white's turn, so it's not going to happen. And once you made this cluster and have this square under control, d3, there is no way for black anymore to create problems, and eventually you will improve your king, you will improve your queen, and you will push one of these guys, one of these guys is going to get pushed, and then the other one will follow. But of course you cannot do it now, but it will happen eventually. And now Carlsen just defended against one of those pushes, Yeah, that was a threat. And we had an inaccuracy. We had an inaccuracy for Karyakin. Of course, the position is so complicated. I also used engine to help me analyze, because in some positions I understood exactly and I didn't need engine. But here, for example, it is above my level. So I had to ask it for help. So here, the correct way approach was to block the pawn and attack it. And then if black offers trade, you just ignore it. You can now push one of your pawns, and this is a lost position because these pawns are worth more than this rook, because one of them is going to become a queen. But what happens in the game after queen f2, queen c3? Now you cannot push anymore. Same idea doesn't work because this pawn is not blocked. So this pawn is not blocked and it can run. If you run, black has a runner as well, and this would lead to a crazy position with four queens on the board. And if you turn on your engine, it will tell you 000, but this is just crazy. But this was Carlsen's chance. Yeah, this was Carlsen's chance, but he kind of missed it. Yeah, so after queen, let me just go back. Queen f2 was an inaccuracy, so queen d3 was supposed to be played. So then if he goes here, you can push, because there is no that race variation where we both get queens, right? It's not possible. But okay, queen f2 was played, and here Carlsen played queen c3, and now, yeah, now you cannot push because black pushes, so you have to block again. Have to block. You can't let that pawn run. But when you block the d4 pawn, you abandoned the defense of the d2 square, and this was Carlsen's chance. And this one was, I don't know, for me it was logical, so I didn't use the engine to go deep here, but it's logical. Just go in with the queen, and then you don't really want to go up with the king, because rook is coming and some nasty things might happen. So maybe white will have to go back, but if he goes back, you can go back. So that's a repetition. So white would have to find an improvement somewhere. Not really clear how. But instead of all that, after queen f3, Carlsen didn't give check. I don't know what was his time situation. I don't know how much time he had. He's a fast player. Probably he had time, but I don't know. I haven't checked that. So he went back with his queen. It looks like he's controlling these two guys because rook and queen are doing the job. But actually, we will see. We will see what happens. King h3 played, and here was the final chance to complicate with queen e1. But Carlsen missed it again. He probably, I don't know, he probably underestimated his chances there. So he went to this blockading style play. But now a simple move which leads to a long variation, which is not so simple. But I'm pretty sure that Karjakin calculated everything, because later on there are some strong moves that he had to find and play, and I'm pretty sure that he saw them here, because if he just gambled and entered this position without seeing everything, that doesn't suit his style and it looks too risky. But let's see. After this exchange, the third rank opens, and this gives black a tactical opportunity to push the pawn, and when white takes, there is this double attack. So black wins a piece, and he will be a rook up, but white has these beautiful pawns, and they're stronger than a rook. Just the important detail is not to go up. If you go up, then when black takes, there is a checkmate threat. If you, for example, push, you get mated pretty quickly. So you cannot push. You have to first give space to your king with, for example, f5. But here, black wins. Here, black wins just because of this f5 move. Because that means that these two pawns will be traded, and then black will have a passed pawn. And before black does anything like that, he's going to put his rook here. And what this means? This means that these two pawns are useless now. I told you they're stronger than a rook, but you need to be able to push one of them one step further. If the rook catches you like this, your pawns are useless. So why? Because this guy cannot go, it will just be snapped. And this guy cannot go because the c6 guy will fall. So, for example, no one is defending this guy, and you don't have time. You don't have time. Black catches you. So the important part is not to go up. Of course, Karjakin saw that, so he played down. Rook takes bishop, and now b6. So now the pawns are stronger than a rook because they reached both 6th rank. So the rook cannot stop them, but rook can sacrifice itself, or I mean, it cannot, sorry. If it sacrifices, it's done. But he can try to capture one pawn and then play against the queen and establish a blockade, as we will see. Rook b3, b7, rook b6. And this is a very smart play by Carlsen. Of course, he is an excellent endgame player. And this is a trap in which many people would fall. Many people. Look, you push and you say, oh, one of them is queening, as I said earlier. But look, after rook b7, you make queen, the rook comes up. And now you have this guy that controls these two squares. And you have your rook that can shuffle between them, yeah? So it can go back and forth between these two squares. And I don't see how the king can cross the 5th rank. I don't see. I just don't see how. Maybe there is a way, but I don't see it. But Karjakin is not spring chicken either. He found a wonderful move, and I'm pretty sure that he found this move when he played Queen f4, so some 7 moves ago or 6, because you don't enter this position without seeing this idea. What's this about? So first of all, in the game, Carlsen took. And when you take, there is no pawn here to make that, you know, like that support to the black's rook to oscillate between the two squares. But let's see if he didn't take, if he tried the same idea. So let's say he wants to take one pawn and let white make a queen and then establish a blockade on these two squares. Now it's not possible because we give check and black can't take it because of checkmate. And if he doesn't take it, then white just has a passed pawn, which will soon become a queen. So Carlsen had to take. That's the explanation. Now another good move. Improve your king. And when he takes, we make a queen. And of course Carlsen wants to block on the 5th rank. But it's not possible because there is no pawn on g6. You know, if this pawn was back, it could control these two squares. But that's not possible. It just cannot go backwards with the pawn. And also, you might think, okay, I will block you on these two squares because I have f7 pawn. Yeah, but white has this pawn, and when it goes here, he will kick you from those two squares. And if you don't have a square which can be supported by a pawn, you cannot block with the rook. Okay, this is a little bit advanced stuff, but I tried to explain it at least a little bit. So Carlsen tried rook c5, we had queen b2 check, f6, king h4, and here the world champion resigned. Why did he resign? Because his blocking squares are controlled by this pawn, and what that means is that the c5 rook will have to abandon the 5th rank. It will have to, because if he doesn't, then the queen will just give checks and pick it up. So when if the rook could be able to be on one of these squares supported by the pawn, he could oscillate there and not let white progress. But once this c5 rook abandons the 5th rank, then the king will cross it. And when the king crosses the 5th rank, this position is over. There are two options. cross it this way or go this way, because once you get behind, if this pawn is on third rank, it's lost. If it was one rank back, it would not be lost. Plus white has one pawn. So this Carlsen, of course, realized all this and he resigned. So a great game, a very interesting game, very enterprising play by Karjakin, sacrificing an exchange and first taking that h5 pawn, because I saw that so many times and no one dared to take it. Maybe someone did, but I haven't seen it. I saw many grandmasters not take that pawn against Carlsen, against the same guy, the world champion. But Karjakin took it, even though it's not the best move. He took the challenge and outplayed Carlsen later on. It's obvious that Carlsen is not in the best form. I don't know why, but of course he's still the best, but for some reason he's not in the best form. So this gives very good chances to his challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi. So who knows what will happen in November. And also one, sometimes there is some luck in chess, or maybe wisdom, I don't know, because Carlsen used this weapon against Caruana in his match a few years ago. But in the previous match, he didn't play this stuff. But imagine if he had played that stuff against Karjakin, because as you can see, Karjakin can win these kind of positions. But the other kind of positions that Carlsen played at that time, he was less able to win. He won one, but one only. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a little bit long, but a world champion and his previous challenger, I think they deserved a long video. Alright, see you next time. Bye.